Hi everybody, welcome to another video of SabreCSG, a level editing tool for Unity. In this video I'm going to take a crack at making a multiplayer level, or just kind of a rough outline for one since I'm not building it for an actual game. If you haven't followed the previous tutorials, then this might help you get a sense of the way you can build with SabreCSG, but it might also help to have seen those videos as well. So either watch a little bit and then switch to those tutorials, or watch through it and then watch those other tutorials later to get a sense of what I'm doing. I'm not going to take too much time explaining the basics, but let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I did was just switch to a top-down view because I'm going to be building the basic floor plan to start off with. And generally, I like to think of each one of these grid units as basically a meter. So a good minimum hallway width is about 4 units. So I'm thinking for this map I'm going to make a kind of rocket arena or something like that. And I'm thinking the center room should have a width something like that. Okay, so that gives us a start. And then I think I'm going to have walls around this. Right now I'm just getting a sense of the floor plan before I go ahead and build the vertical elements of the level, because I find this is a little bit faster to do and a little bit easier to work with. Okay, so this area here will be the basic framework for the arena. Now I'm thinking about how, well, yeah, let me go ahead and just turn this into an actual shape rather than having these gaps in it. Okay. So now before I finish that, let me go ahead and create these corner pieces as well. Okay, looks like I forgot to build one over here, or accidentally deleted it or something. So there we go. Now with this center block, as you can see, there are these kind of overlapping corners, and we don't really want that. So I'm going to go ahead and clip those off. Okay, now I am going to go ahead and switch to perspective mode and rebuild. As you can see, it's just kind of your basic plane right now. So I'm going to take the center and lower that. And then I think probably what I'm going to do is push back these a little bit so I have room to make like a staircase here or something. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and switch to clip mode and also switch to wireframe and just split. and that is separating each one of these brushes into two parts. Okay. And now I'm going to switch back to surface so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, let me go ahead and rebuild as well. And I'm just going to take each one of these clipped bits, or rather split bits, and shrink that down. Okay. Now if I rebuild, okay. Now I think what I want to do here is also clip back these pieces as well. In fact, I'm not even going to bother with the clipping that I was doing. I'm just going to go ahead and expand this inner piece using vertex mode. So to do that, I'm just going to grab each vertex individually and push that out to these corners. Level design is a pretty iterative process. Oh, it looks like we have a concave brush. You can see that's because this vertex and that vertex would create a line past this one. If you get a concave brush error like I just got, you can just fix it and the error goes away. But as I was saying before that concave brush error, level design is a pretty iterative process, and I don't have a plan when I'm building this level right now. So this is more of just playing around a little bit and getting a sense for what seems like the right idea. And if you are really under pressure or really under a deadline, it's a good idea to sketch out your level on paper and get a sense of what you're trying to achieve, what the level is going to look like, and then it's just a lot faster. But again, I'm just playing around right now, and this is hopefully it won't be too bad. Okay, so now if we switch to ortho view, I think probably the next thing to do is build these walls up all the way around here. Okay, so to build this wall, I'm going to go ahead and switch to resize mode and put us back in isometric view and go ahead and scale it up here. And generally, like I said, about 4 units is pretty good hallway width, and same thing for height. But since I'm imagining this as kind of a rocket arena and there's going to be lots of explosions going off, we should probably increase that to more like 8. Or 6 should be good. Okay, let's go ahead and duplicate that over here. Okay, and then because I want to maintain this line here and keep those edges all nice and happy, I'm going to go ahead and decrease the position snapping so I can get that 2 to 1 angle. I'm going to do the same thing on this side, and then the same thing on this side. You'll also notice that I basically did the same thing with this floor plan, and you may not know why I did that. So let me go ahead and just demonstrate the reason why here. Let's say that I've got this, let me switch to resize mode first. Let's say I've got this block like this. Let's imagine that there are walls all around this. This is just a hallway going through some building or something. And we want to connect this hallway chunk to another one that is over here. I should probably be doing this in resize mode. Okay. And the way we want to connect this is just a nice little angled hallway. And the most obvious way of doing that would be just to line up all of the vertices. Take this corner and line it up with that corner, this corner and line it up with that corner. As you see, if you were actually walking in this hallway, this part right here is much more narrow than these parts before. And if we're designing a multiplayer map, or something that requires very fast movement or has splash damage weapons, like, again, if this is a rocket arena, this is going to be just way too narrow. So we want to kind of have a consistent width through the hallways. And the way to do that is to usually go with a 2-to-1 ratio or a 1-to-4 ratio, depending on how you're going to angle the hallway. So here, let's go ahead and go like that. Again, that's not exact, but it's much closer than the previous example. And that's why I'm also doing that with angles here. That's also why I'm angling these wall pieces. So let's go ahead and delete these since we don't need them. And then go ahead and duplicate these little bits of walls. Now what you're going to see here when I rotate is that the rotation occurs around the center of the brush, and that has broken grid alignment. So what you want to do is just decrease position snapping so you can get back to that. I'm going to go ahead and leave that on when I duplicate this brush and move to the other side. There we go. Okay, now for the corner piece, I'm also going to increase angular snapping so I don't have to be quite as precise. Let's see. Let's go ahead and 30 should be good. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate this. Okay. Then I can go back to resize mode and go like that. Now, one problem with this area I have right now is that it's really symmetrical, and that kind of makes for boring level design, or at least it's disorienting. Like if a player was standing right here and was looking out across this whole courtyard area, they wouldn't be able to tell if they were standing here or if they were standing here and looking across this way, because it's all kind of the same. So I'm going to go ahead and change this corner and make this corner let's go ahead and do it like that. Trying to think of how to do this the way that I want it. In any case, it's going to be a nice 90-degree angle instead of the 45-degree angles that I've been doing. Let's go ahead and line those up. Okay, and now the problem is that we're going to have this little gap here, and one way we can deal with that is if we just clip and split. And let's see, let's go ahead and delete that chunk. And then we've basically just cut off a vertex or two. Now if we rebuild, let's see how that looks. Okay, it's kind of a start. It's a little bit tight, but if we have a floor above this that's kind of receded in a little more ways, then this should be a good start to our arena. Okay, so for the second floor of the arena, I don't want this circular pattern all the way around. I want it to be more of kind of two sides, or maybe all but one side. And to think about that, I'm going to first create a pillar in this corner, and maybe also a pillar at the other corners. We'll see. But start off with definitely pillar in this corner. To do that, I'm going to switch back to top-down isometric and go to wireframe. And I'm going to go ahead and increase the grid. Duplicate this brush. It seems to me like a good pillar width would be 2 units. That might be a little bit too much, but we can change that later if we want to. Okay, now from the side view. Alright, and if the floor is going to be right there, we will want to one more than that. There we go. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create a start to the second floor. I'm just going to duplicate the floor down here, adjust it slightly, and then bring that up to the floor above. And I'm actually going to set that, I'm actually going to lower the walls so that the floor above can rest on top of those walls. And to do that, I'm just going to switch to this perspective briefly. It might be a little faster here to use resize mode, but I personally prefer sometimes to just be able to marquee select the vertices and use the movement widget that appears once you've done so. Okay. And now we can go back to our floor and back to a axis line perspective. Okay, so for this top floor, let's go ahead and make that 6 units wide instead of just the 4. Let's go ahead and have this part here go back something like that. Let's go 2 less than that. Let's create another one, and here I am going to switch to resize mode because it definitely will be faster in this case. Okay. Okay. Now, with this one, I'm not going to go quite all the way. I'm just going to go up to this point here. Now let's see how that looks once I rebuild and switch to shaded. Okay, so we can see once we've built a wall around this, that the second floor is kind of interesting. That point's a little ugly, but we can fix that pretty easily. Duplicate this, bring that up. Oh, that was 1 too high. Oh, that was 1 too low. There we go. And go with something like that. Okay, then what I'm going to do on this other side is have something like this. Let's see how we want to do that. You know, I'm also going to go ahead and delete the floor here and treat this corner differently. Let's go ahead and decrease that grid again. And okay, well that's getting a little more interesting now. We'll have to see if that works. Go ahead and rebuild. Yeah, now let's build a wall around the outside. To do that, I'm just going to go ahead and grab the wall that we already created for the lower floor, switch to top view, switch to wireframe, and duplicate, and drag that up like that. Okay. Okay, now we should have a wall all the way around the second floor. Let's go ahead and rebuild. Okay, now let's see how that looks from the ground floor in particular. Okay. So I think the thing we want to do next is find a way to connect this bottom floor to the top floor, because right now on the bottom floor there's no real way to the top floor. So I think the way to do that is just to start by creating a doorway in one of these lower walls. So I'm going to first just create the wall, or rather select it and duplicate it. And before I start resizing it, let me switch to a top-down view, make that wireframe, and just adjust these. That way I can increase the scaling. Everything stays nice and happy. Okay, let's make this door frame 4x4. It's way bigger than it should be in reality, but does make it good for something like Rocket Arena, where you don't want players to have too much of a choke point. And let's make that centered in the wall. And you'll notice that I did switch it to subtractive mode just by using the keyboard shortcut S. You can switch back to additive with A and subtractive with S. When it's selected, you might not be able to notice, especially in wireframe mode, but if you look down here, you can see how it's changing. If I go to shaded mode and bring that off to the side, then you can see it right away. You can also see it down here in the hierarchy, but probably best to just go ahead and keep your eyes on the object itself, since sometimes the hierarchy can kind of get pretty full. Okay, so here we have our doorway. Now we need to create somewhere for that to go. So let's go ahead and create a platform. I'm going to switch to isometric again and make this back into kind of a cuboid shape instead of the trapezoid. And I think what I'm going to do for this is to have I'm going to have a platform up on the second floor as well, and then have basically just a set of staircases kind of working together. I'm going to have, well, let's go ahead and explore a little bit first. I'm thinking I'm going to need at least 12 units, since I want the staircases to be probably 6 units wide. So let's go ahead and go with something like that. Maybe a little bit more. Okay. Let's create a platform for the top floor. That will be a little bit smaller. Let's also, while we're at it, go ahead and just drag that doorway to the top floor. Okay, so now what I'm thinking, let's go ahead and switch to perspective mode for a second, and go ahead and rebuild, and shaded. So what I'm thinking here is maybe have a staircase running from the bottom floor along this side, and another one running along this side, and then have that go up to a platform here, and then have another little staircase running up to the top floor the rest of the way. That might make it a little too tight, so it might be better just to have one staircase and have it be more of one going down here and one there, and leave more space on this bottom floor. But let's go ahead and try that first option and see what we think of it. So to start off with, I'm going to switch back to this view mode, and let's go ahead and just create our first little staircase. that. You know, on the bottom floor, let's go ahead and go like that. And then let's create another one like that. Now, you want to change the width. Accidentally changed the width of the screen there. Hopefully that didn't mess up the video too much. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and switch to the side view again. I've already duplicated this one. And create a nice platform with 6 units wide. That should give players a decent amount of room to maneuver. Okay, now let's go ahead and rebuild and see how that looks. Okay, so I think that should be pretty good. One thing I might do is add a little space in here, because right now on the staircase you can see pretty far into this next room. Now we could change that by decreasing the door size a little bit. Again, I'm a little worried about those doors becoming too much choke points if this is going to be something like Rocket Arena. But we also want to be careful of really long line sights, because it's not very interesting for players to be fighting each other from one room to the other. It's more interesting if they're both in the same room and kind of using that arena space that each room has. When you're fighting between rooms, it's a little too much of a standoff, at least with the kind of rooms that we have right now. So I'm going to go ahead and build a wall around this to enclose this shape. Okay. This wall is going to have 2 parts because we've got this little lip here that we're working with. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that to create the second part. Okay. Now I'm just going to duplicate each one of these and slide them over a little bit more. And here we go. And then one wall for the back. Okay, let's go ahead and rebuild and see how that looks from the inside. Okay, so that is pretty tight. Maybe one thing we can do to improve that is just give ourselves a little more width. So for example, I think what we want to do here is take this one, make that 6 wide, so it's more of a platform. Okay, and then I think what we also want to do is maybe something a little bit more like this. Okay, let's go ahead and rebuild. I know some of those corners are going to be not quite right, but we'll be easier to see once we rebuilt. Yeah, I forgot to move this one. But before I go ahead and make that change and rebuild it as well, this is the corner I'm talking about here. So I think I've got an idea for how we can fix that. But let me go ahead and move this wall here first. So resize, move that back. And then the way I'm going to fix this wall is, right now the way I'm approaching that is this kind of skinny wall chunk. And I think the way to actually do that is treat it more like a block. And that will become more apparent in just a moment. Okay, so I'm going to start with this by going ahead and duplicating this wall and making it cuboid, getting rid of these kind of angled edges. There we go. Then I'm going to switch back to resize and switch back to 1 for grid unit. That way it's a little easier to work with. And then I'm going to go ahead and just make this nice square here. And if we see this wall here, this wall here, this is where the wall that we're trying to replace is originally at. So right now we have this corner sticking out and we want to clip that off. Okay, but now we have a smooth edge here, or rather just flat and aligned with this other wall instead of having the angled edge that we need to deal with. And that should make it easier for us. Let me go ahead and make sure that I deleted the wall behind here. Yep, there we go. And then let's go ahead and duplicate and do the same thing on this side. Okay, now if we rebuild, switch to free mode, shaded, and perspective, let's see if that fixed it. There we go. Nice happy corners. And we also have a lot more space, so this room is a little less tight. I do want to still deal with that sightline a little bit though. It's that like right here, it's not quite as visible of the doorway. I want to cut through about right there, which means I'm going to go ahead and take this block, duplicate it, slide it over, and basically just take that and turn it into a pillar. Okay, now if I deselect and rebuild, yeah, a little bit better. Or at least, if a player is in this room and they see somebody, they're more likely to, one of the players is more likely to chase the other player into the other room, rather than just hanging out here and fighting across the doorway. Or at least that's the hope. Okay, so now let's see, we've got one way from the base floor to the top floor. Oh, but one thing I haven't done yet is we have this inner ring that's about 1 unit high, and by default, with the player free prefab that you can get in the default assets, the player is, I think, 2 units high, just under 2 meters, and that means that this block is kind of a waist-high wall, and that's quite a step. So what we want to do here is create some stairs, or create a ramp. For now, let's just go ahead and create a ramp. So to start off, I'm going to take this chunk, move that in, and again make that more of a cuboid shape. And now I want to clip it along this face so that, there we go, and now we have a nice ramp. So now I want to do that for all of these sides, but since we have a ramp now, I don't have to individually create them. I can instead just modify the one I already have. So I'm going to switch to wireframe mode and go ahead and use resize, duplicate, rotate, duplicate, rotate, duplicate, and rotate. Now you'll see with these corners, like right now there's this gap right there, and that's just no good. So we're going to go ahead and move that in. Same thing there, and same thing there. Okay, duplicate again. And although you can fix concavities if they occur, for example like that, just move it back and it's fine. I generally prefer to avoid them. That's mostly just preference. So if you keep your shape as a parallelogram, there shouldn't be any issue of concavities occurring until you change that into a different shape, like I've just done here. But so long as it's parallelogram, like that, I can move there, I can move there. That's all nice and convex. Okay, now we have the corner piece. I'll do the same thing over here. Okay, so now let's go ahead and switch to free mode, rebuild, perspective, and shaded. Okay, now we have these nice little ramps. Right now this is a pretty basic arena, but I think I'm going to call it here, at least for the time being. Probably, if we continue this, we'll want to have another way for players to access the top floor than this current area. Maybe a doorway over here, or maybe a doorway over here. Again, something to keep in mind when building this kind of layout is the player's sightlines. If we did build a doorway over here, you have to consider how far back you can see. But if we built one over here, then you can only see that little sliver. But that's a, I think, pretty good start to this level, and hopefully that gives you a better idea of how to work with SabreCSG. Thanks.